Welcome to episode 5 in our series on how we work at Basecamp. So in the last video, we looked at the hill chart and how it allows us to track the progress of our work from unknown to known and then from known to done. And what I want to focus on in this video is what is it that we actually track on the hill and how is it that we break up the work so that we track the right pieces of the work over the hill. So this is actually kind of a secret sauce behind using the hill properly. We can't just track every single to-do item, and we have to figure out kind of what are the right ways to break the work into pieces so that we can track parts of the work that we can make progress on independently. All right. So the way that we break up the work, that's going to become our to-do lists in Basecamp, and then the to-do lists are what we track on the hill. So I want to show you all of this with an example. So we're going to look at some actual work. We'll look at a project, and then we'll see how to break it up and what it looks like to track it on the hill. So here's the project that we are considering. So this is the marketing site for Basecamp, and suppose we have an idea that we would like to display some kind of an advertisement in the corner here to announce upcoming live streaming events. So we want to have some kind of online workshops where we can teach people how we do things with Basecamp and give them ideas for what Basecamp could do for them. So we came up with this idea that maybe we could have some kind of an ad somewhere in the corner or somewhere on the homepage that all the traffic to basecamp.com would see. And it would tell them that there's one of these online streaming workshops happening, and it would give them the ability to kind of RSVP or give an email address and then be reminded and then ultimately tune in and see the event. So this is kind of the level of thinking before we commit to doing a project. First, we need to kind of spell it out to see what would really be involved and what is it that we're trying to do here. And we think, let's say for this example, that we need a kind of lightweight CMS because we don't want to manually update the page every time this happens, but we want to build a little bit of a system for tracking these events and doing the reminding and storing the email addresses and stuff like that. So we sketch out the idea and it looks like this. So we're going to have some kind of a widget for the ad in JavaScript, and that's going to appear on the page, and it'll have, the name of the event and the time and so on. And then this will link people to a sign-up page. And the sign-up page will describe the event, and there will be a field there for entering their email address. If they enter their email address, we'll show them a little screen that says like, thank you, you'll hear from us when the event gets closer. And then as time goes by, there's going to be some kind of a clock on the system somewhere that notices when the event starts to get near, whether it's a week ahead or a day ahead or an hour ahead, we'll figure that out. And this back-end process will send an email to people that says, hey, this event's coming up. Remember, you wanted to watch this. And there will be a link there. So whether it's YouTube or some other service, there will be a link to actually see the event. And then, of course, since we're sending an email, we have to be nice and give them the chance to unsubscribe if they want to do that. So there will be a link at the bottom. And then if they do that, it'll just say, of course, that's taken care of. With one click, you're unsubscribed. And then, of course, we also need some sort of a way to put the data into the system so that the homepage knows when it should show an event and all the details are available to display. So we need some kind of a back-end administrative system for this. So first step would be some kind of a authorization step like username and password, or because we don't want anybody in the world to be able to post events on our website, obviously. And then we would have a list of events that have been scheduled, and then some sort of a way to create a new event. So there'd be some sort of a form, type in the name of the event and the description, and when there's a link, let's say for the YouTube, paste that in there and so on, time and date, all that. And then, of course, if we create an event, then we're likely to notice things that we want to change, maybe change the title or fix a typo or adjust the date or something like that. So then we could have an edit form to make those changes. And then lastly, we might think about, well, what would we do if we had to cancel an event? And if people already had signed up and provided email addresses, we might want to have some sort of a confirmation, like, well, before you delete this event, confirm whether or not you really want to cancel because this is going to impact all these people who are expecting to attend. And if we say, yes, indeed, we are going to cancel this event, maybe we could fire off an email to everybody that says, hey, this event is no longer happening. So that is kind of the way we might spell out the work for a project before we make the step of budgeting it. So this is before it goes into a cycle, before we make that deliberate allocation that we talked about. So this is kind of at the pitch level where we've got a concept figured out. And now let's say we look at this scope of work and we say, okay, this is doable within the 6 weeks. There's some version of this that we can do, and let's go ahead and schedule it and have a team work on it. Now, what we've described here is what you would normally call, the project scope or the scope of work. And then what the team is going to do when they start to actually work on this is they're going to go from one scope of work to scopes plural. So what they want to do, they're going to break this work down into independent subscopes. And these are the things that we're going to create to-do lists for and track on the hill. And how do we break this down into scopes? Well, it's by looking at where the different parts are independent of each other and where they're connected. So let's just take a quick tour of what that looks like. So we're going to the team is going to roll up their sleeves and start to look at the work. And they're going to start to kind of create a little mental list of scopes. So it's like we have our little notepad here and we're starting to note the different scopes. So first of all, of course, the widget we can say is its own thing, because we have to figure out kind of how is the ad going to display on the homepage, how is it going to look, where is it going to fit in. But we don't have to think about what the sign-up form looks like. We don't have to worry about where the data came from, really. We don't have to think about the reminder. It's a problem that we can work on independently of the rest. So we'll say widget is one scope. Similar with sign-up, we can, the sign-up, of course, it depends on having the description and the text to show. But other than that, we can think about it more or less as an independent flow and an independent design problem. So we can say that sign up is its own concern. That's its own scope. Reminding, similarly, we have to figure out the design of the email and make decisions about when and when's the right time to remind. But other than the common data that it needs to have, this is something we can think about independently again. So remind is a scope. And we start to look at the back end. Now, we need to have an authorization step so that people from the public can't just go in and post events on our website. But the way that we secure this back end, it doesn't really affect how the back end actually works. It's just a step. It just has to be that authorization step. So whether it's a username and password or a hard-coded password, or if it integrates into some full-on permissioned identity system we have as part of our IT, the authorization is like just one piece of the puzzle that we can think about independent of the rest. And then when we look at the list of events and the ability to create new events and edit events, this is going to happen in a tight loop. You create something and then it's not quite right and then you edit it and so on. So we can just kind of take this as one scope and we'll call it the event admin. And then because we don't actually know if we're going to need to do cancellation, and because we can think of cancellation as a separate problem and a separate flow, we're going to actually define that as a separate scope of work as well. So if cancellation is something that ends up happening often, or for some reason, it needs to happen quickly by a non-technical person, then it might be good to have this support for it in the product. But at the same time, if it happens very rarely, maybe we could just have somebody go into under the hood and manually fire off an email to people or something. Who knows if it's going to be an issue or not. So we'll treat that separately. So here we are with a list of scopes, and these kind of draw the lines between the main different independent parts of the work that we can make progress on. So the next step is we take this list of scopes and we go over to Basecamp, and each one of these becomes a to-do list. So this is going to enable two very useful things for us. First of all, this is going to give us a place to accumulate all of the to-do items as we start to uncover the work. The work isn't all just predefined waiting for us on a stone tablet somewhere. We actually have to start to roll up our sleeves and figure out what are all the little things we're going to have to do to build this and make it work. And now we have a place to collect those tasks per scope. Then the other thing this is going to allow us to do is to track our progress on the hill chart. So the way that we do that is we're going to go to each one of these lists and then go to the option menu and say track on the hill. And we're just going to do this for each list. And then this is going to make the hill chart appear, and these different dots for each list are going to start to show up there. So after we've done this for all of our lists, then we're going to see something like this. Every scope is piled up on the left side of the hill. That's because we haven't actually worked on these yet, so they are 100% unknown, right? We have to actually start to work on it and figure out what we're doing before we can move it uphill. So let's say that we start to do some work on the widget. The widget's the most important thing, so we say that's the thing we want to push uphill first. So the designers on the team and the programmers on the team, they start to figure out what's needed and what's involved, and they come up with an early list. So the widget itself has to be designed. They identify there's going to be a live state, which is like, what does the widget look like if the event is actually happening, like right now? And then there's some technical things like an API endpoint and how does the JavaScript client work to fetch the data from the backend and that sort of a thing. Now you might notice here, by the way, that we're mixing together different types of work. So front end and back end, and later on we'll also put QA items here in the same list. That's because if we collect all the work that has to happen for this one scope on the same list, then we can track this one independent piece of the project from unknown to known and known to done. And it's going to really mean something. It doesn't just mean that one little piece of the work is done. It means this whole piece is something that we can knock out and finish. And then this allows us to know where we stand as we get closer and closer to the end of the cycle, so that we make sure that we're prioritizing the right work and we're pushing the right things up and downhill. So here we've actually done some useful uphill work by figuring out what these tasks are. This was real work. This wasn't just management. I mean, this required thinking about the problem. So now we can go over to Basecamp. And here I've got this project open in Basecamp. So it's a widget CMS and all our lists are here. And now we can actually move this widget scope uphill a bit to show that, hey, we've figured out part of what we need to do. We've made progress here. So suppose that I'm the designer on this project and I start to do some more design work. And let's say that I get the basic design of the widget figured out, and so that's done. But along the way, I discover that it's not very clear how we're going to render this ad on the mobile version, the phone version of the homepage. So I'm going to add a to-do here that says mobile widget design. And I might spell that out a little bit better if we were taking more time, but that captures the issue. We have to deal with it on mobile. And here I've made progress, and I've also kind of added more work. So I still have an unknown with this mobile widget design, but I do have the basic design on the desktop version working. And let's say that the programmers haven't had a chance to look at this yet, so these are still unknowns. So I can actually make an update here to the hill, and I'm just going to say that based on conversations with the programmers, we're not very concerned about the back end, not a ton of unknowns there, but the phone issue is kind of a big one. So I'm going to say I've got this partly figured out. And if we get more confident in the back end and we've got the phone approach figured out, that'll bring us to the top of the hill. So I'm going to save that and say that is the progress on the widget. Now, suppose that the programmers aren't yet available to look at the backend for the widget. So that's going to stay where it is. So now I can go off to a different scope to make some progress. So let's say that I pick off the sign-up scope, and turns out that the sign-up screen is quite straightforward to design, and there aren't very many open questions about it. And the programmers haven't had a look at it yet, so I don't have total certainty that everything's clean and going to be okay. But it's basically fine. So I can do that sign-up design, and maybe in the process I populate some to-dos and check them off. But then when it's time to do a status update, I can grab this sign-up scope and show that, like, hey, I think I've got this figured out. Sign-up's looking really good. And now let's suppose that I talk to the programmers, and a couple days go by, and say, hey, is there any, have you had a chance to work on anything yet? And it turns out that the programmers have been focused on the event backend because they thought that it would be useful to just be able to create events and edit events as raw data to show up in the ad and the different sign-up screens and so on. So it turns out that they could use basically the prepackaged coding stuff that we have. There's some scaffolds that we use that kind of make it really easy to do this kind of data entry, and already they've gotten the event admin over the hill. There's no unknowns left. Since it's just pure administration, there's no unknowns on the design side that hold us back from saying, yeah, we got this figured out, this will be fine. It's just a question of having a bunch of fields and saving them in the database. So they've got this roughly wired up and it's basically working. And there might be a lot of small details, there might be validations, there might be little edge cases that have to be figured out, but that's all downhill work. So already the event admin is boom, all the way over here. And then it turns out that along the way, they ran into this authorization scope because they thought, okay, well, you know, we should come up with a solution for that. And they said, you know what, we've only got 2 people who are going to be posting events. We're a small company, everybody knows each other. Let's just hard code a password and we'll just write it on the chalkboard or whatever, right? So actually auth went from a whole scope of work that could have involved maybe integration with an IT system and setting up a permission rule and everything for who's able to use this backend system, to just a hard-coded password, and boom, we can say that that work is all the way on the other side, and it's totally complete. So here you can see what it might look like after a few days of work on a few different scopes of work that we can do in parallel, and how we get this nice overview of where everything stands on the hill. And I'll just give you one more example to show how this works in real life. So suppose the programmers they take a look at the back-end work that has to happen here for the widget. And there's no more unknowns for the back-end at all. Everything's clean and clear there. However, I haven't yet come back to think about the mobile design. And I still don't know how I'm going to fit this ad on the phone. I don't see where it can go. So in this case, it's confusing, like where do I put the dot on the hill? This mobile thing is a big unknown. So I don't feel like everything's fine and it's almost over the top of the hill. I could maybe push it up a little bit to indicate that we don't have anything technical holding us back. So let's say I'll do that here. But this doesn't really communicate the fact that I have no idea how to handle this on mobile. And we have a lot of traffic on mobile. It's a big problem. So here's what we're going to do. I'm going to actually factor this out into a separate scope. And this is the kind of thing that happens all the time as we do a real project and as we learn. So what I'm going to do here is I'm going to create a new list, and I'm going to call this mobile widget. And I'm going to track this list on the hill. And then I'm going to go back to my to-do section here, and I'm going to drag this mobile widget design to this list. And maybe I can give this a better name. Figure out where the widget can fit on mobile. And then I can rename widget to desktop widget. And now I've removed the big uncertainty that was holding the desktop widget back. So now when I go to update, I can drag desktop widget over the hill. Maybe we have a couple technical tasks left, so based on how much downhill work there is, maybe I'll say it's here. And then mobile widget, I've got no idea. So mobile widget stands here on the left side. Now we've got a more accurate picture for where the project stands for anybody that happens to take a look here. And we also have a better way to talk about kind of what needs our attention next. So if we take a look at the left side of the hill here, we can see mobile widget, cancel event, and remind are scopes that are left. Now the reminder, maybe we think, okay, is there anything that's difficult there? And we do a little bit of sketching, and we realize, okay, that's That's not a very hard problem. Cancel, uh, we talked earlier that we might not even need cancel at all. So we're not going to work on that next. But the mobile widget, like if we can't figure out how to do this on mobile, the whole idea kind of falls down a little bit. So this is a case where we might now pull in 2 or 3 other designers or one senior person or something and have a quick ad hoc meeting and say, look, anybody have an idea for how to deal with this mobile thing, right? So we're going to prioritize pushing the mobile widget uphill first. So then we might have a meeting for that, come up with a solution, and then we would be able to indicate that we've made progress toward figuring out that solution. Maybe we're only a little bit uphill because we still have to actually test it, try it on a phone with a prototype version to see if we really believe in the concept. But we could start here, right? And then from here, again, looking at what's actually important here. Cancel might not need to happen. Remind we definitely need, but remind can be very simple also. It's just an email template, so maybe we work on that next. So that's a look at kind of how we break everything up. And then I'll just end by showing you that now that we've created these different updates, all of this is recorded here on the history. So we can actually see kind of what happened, how widget moved, and then sign up got done, and then event admin got done, and then the auth was done, and then here widget moved up a bit further, and then the widget got over the hill, and we introduced the mobile widget until we figured out how to handle the mobile widget. And of course, we could be using annotations, we could have discussions about the state of these things. There's a lot more that we can do here, but this should give you kind of a good sense of how we break up the hill and how we break up the work to track on the hill, and then what it looks like to show progress and to check in on progress over time. So that's kind of a good wrap on the main things we wanted to talk about managing work inside the cycle. So if you have some questions or things that you think we could expand on with this part of how we work, please let us know in the comments, and then we can consider that for a future video.